Hey everyone, I'm Janice Davis, and this is MMORPG.com's The List. MMO launches are one of the trickiest things in the world for a developer and publisher to orchestrate. In the case of a single-player game, the experience can be perfectly balanced and simulated in a controlled environment. For a multiplayer game, you can easily cap the number of players involved and know how it's going to turn out in a live scenario. A massively multiplayer game, on the other hand, is something else entirely. There are hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of people from all around the world on different types of hardware, playing at different times, different service providers, different connection speeds, all trying to play your game at the exact same minute. With all the MMOs out there, narrowing this list down to the 5, hate to say it, worst MMO launches was pretty tough, but here it goes. Number 5, All Points Bulletin. Back before Grand Theft Auto created a literal Grand Theft Auto online experience, All Points Bulletin, or APB, tried to be that very thing. In fact, the creator of both the original Grand Theft Auto and Crackdown series, David Jones, was the lead designer on APB. The pre-release hype was real, and expectations were pretty high around the game leading up to its launch in June of 2010. Fast forward 6 weeks after launch, and the developer, Real Time Worlds, is placed into administration, which is basically life support for struggling businesses. Everything from technical bugs to connectivity issues, gameplay concerns, bad design, and any other problem you could think of were plaguing the game from the start. Just a few weeks later, in September 2010, the game shut down. In just 3 short months, the game de-launched. However, APB has since found new life and is a much improved free-to-play title that's currently available. Number 4, Vanguard Saga of Heroes. Since Vanguard Saga of Heroes no longer exists, many gamers look back on its life with rose-colored glasses. Others said that at launch, Vanguard could be confused with other big titles such as EverQuest 2, but still others remarked that the entire diplomacy system, in and of itself, was actually a unique and innovative move forward for the genre as a whole. Unfortunately, the game's launch did go poorly. In a world where World of Warcraft was nearly 3 years old, putting out a new AAA MMO that isn't polished and ready for the world to see is asking for trouble. Maybe it was the almost complete lack of instancing or zoning or the ambitious scope of the game at launch, but it just didn't seem finished. Server connectivity or balance issues are one thing, but when the underlying code that your game is built upon is sloppy and messed up, that's something that takes months or even years to fix. Because of these issues, Vanguard made the list. Number 3, Anarchy Online. Other factors that contribute to a poor MMO launch are not being able to log in, getting kicked off, losing progress, and other frustrating network issues. In that regard, Anarchy Online did face these challenges and more that produced a launch to remember, in a bad way. Gamers were having issues just subscribing to the game, plus problems actually playing it once they had access. Keep in mind, the game launched way back in 2001. During that time, a ton of people were still using dial-up connections, so waiting in a queue wasn't always an option. Luckily, the game was able to come back from its rocky start, but those opening few months were truly about as rough as anyone could ever imagine. Number 2, World of Warcraft. The hero in its own tale of true redemption, World of Warcraft fought its way back from a horrific launch to become the most popular and most played MMO in history. But if we flash back 10 years to when the game first launched, times were quite different. It wasn't just server issues. Quests were bugged, animations got stuck, and some portions of the game were simply unplayable. Even the recent Warlords of Draenor had a few unfortunate issues. Number 1, Final Fantasy XIV, the first time. It felt like no other game on this list experienced the perfect storm of under-delivering on expectations, connection issues, gameplay problems, and lack of content all at once. The initial launch of Final Fantasy XIV went so unfortunately that Square Enix even opted not to charge players a subscription fee until it was fixed. When version 2.0 released, Final Fantasy XIV was what players expected and deserved the first time around. Final Fantasy XIV earns the top spot not just because of how awful the launch went, but because the studio was actually able to improve the game and deliver on its original promise. A feat that only serves to underscore how rocky it was to begin with. Well, there we have it. Let's remember that virtually every MMO has had issues surrounding its launch. Behind all of these games are real people, gamers turned to developers that have worked their hands to the bone trying to produce epic games. Also keep in mind that MMOs are an incredibly relative experience. Just because you or I might have had a hard time logging in, doesn't mean that the launch as a whole was terrible. What are your thoughts? We'd love to hear about your launch experiences. I'm Janice Davis for MMORPG.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you online in the next realm.